Hello, 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 and welcome back to Shiksha DaCosta. Today we're going to be talking about ethics, privacy, honesty, and bias as part of collecting one variable data. So today we are learning to consider ethics, privacy, honesty, and bias in our data collection and sampling methods. How do you know that you're good at this? Well, when you can identify situations that involve one variable data, and then when you can design a questionnaire or maybe an experiment for gathering that data. And while doing so, you're giving the proper consideration to these things: the ethics of your data collection, the privacy of the respondents, the need for honest responses and not lies, and finally, any possible sources of bias. This word is going to be really important for us today. You got our minds in the right groove for this lesson. Let's take a look at this email here and see what we notice. So this is from Baldur's Gate Neighborhood Association, and the email reads, "Dear valued member of our association, we at the BGNA are putting together a survey, the results of which we will publish on our website and on our local news feed to try to root out any local troublemakers. Please follow the link below and answer these survey questions. Yours truly, the BGNA." Now you can go ahead and scan this link if you like, and you should end up with a survey that looks like this: neighborhood survey. And it asks you a couple of questions here. What is your full name? And notice the red asterisk. That means that you are not allowed to skip this question. It is required. It indicates a required question. What is your address? How many crimes have you committed? What crimes have you committed? And the only options here are murder, arson, robbery. So I want you to think about this, I want you to look at this and think about this and ask yourself, do you notice anything? Does anything feel off to you? What would you say about receiving an email like this? And take just a few minutes to think about that. Well, hopefully you arrived at some of the same conclusions that I did. Some of the things that I noticed were, first of all, they are publishing this on the website, and they're going to ask me for my full name, which means they're going to publish my full name on the website. Whenever anybody Googles me, they're going to find me here on this crime study. Oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. That might mean that future employers might, when they're looking me up, they might say, "Oh, nope, this guy's not for us." Next question is my address. So the people who see the crimes I've committed will know where I live. And then maybe they think I'm going to get revenge on this guy, or I'm going to be like Batman and get my vigilante justice and come to my house. I don't really feel comfortable answering that either. The next question is, how many crimes have you committed? And I guess maybe I could put 0. But if I was a criminal, if the objective of this survey is to find out any local troublemakers, why would I say I've committed any crimes if I'm a local troublemaker? I would just say, oh, no problem. I'll be part of the study, and everybody will know that I committed 0 crimes. So which troublemaker will actually answer this, honestly? I don't think very many, right? And finally, the last one is here. What crimes have you committed? And the only options here are murder, killing someone, arson, which is setting fire to a building, or robbery, which is stealing somebody from somebody using the threat of force. But what if, like, maybe I have a parking ticket? That's one crime, I guess. It's not really a crime, but I guess I have to, if I say I have committed one crime and I don't get to choose other, or I don't get to choose anyone other than these 3 really awful options, then I guess I may be forced to choose one of them. So I may not want to complete the survey at all because it doesn't give me the option to give my, honest response. The way that this survey is collecting data is wrong in the first place. So when we're surveying people, we need to be able to trust that the data that we collect is actually truthful. And the way that we go about doing that is making sure our methodology, the way we collect our data, our research methods, they must be ethical. They must not be evil, or they must not be full of lies or deceit. This includes protecting the privacy of our respondents. If you're answering a survey and you know that the answer will not be connected back to you, you may be more likely to answer honestly, especially if it's something really personal or embarrassing. You might say, okay, if as long as nobody knows that I'm the one that committed this crime, I'll freely let them know that yes, I've committed some crimes. And that way they can collect data on crime in the neighborhood, but they won't know it's me. So as long as your respondent's privacy is protected, they're more likely to give you honest answers. Finally, you have to make sure that your methodology is free of something called bias. Bias is prejudice that is in favor or against one thing, one person, one group, when compared with something else, usually in a way that's considered to be unfair. That's the official definition. But really what this means is, in research, bias is something that changes our data to be false, to be not truthful, in favor of one idea or in favor of another. So the results of that survey from the BGNA might be biased because it might say that, oh, everybody has committed 0 crimes. Even though they've all selected murder for their crime, they've all said, oh, I've done 0 of these. And so that would be biased because we don't know if that's actually truthful. It is prejudiced in favor of the people who are criminals, I guess, because they have the chance to say 0 crimes, and they are pressured to do so. So just going back to that survey, okay, let's take a look at some of the different ways that this survey is biased, and there are lots and lots. To start us off, over here, how many crimes have you committed? This is an example of something called response bias, when the respondents will change their answers to influence the results, maybe to avoid embarrassment, or maybe just to give the answer that they think that the question wants them to give. So if I'm answering the survey to avoid embarrassment, I would say that I have committed 0 crimes. So this question here then asked us, what crimes have you committed? Murder, arson, or robbery? And we weren't able to choose other at all. We had to choose from one of these, and that is a form of bias called measurement bias, when the way that you're collecting your data will actually skew your data. So it'll either over or underrepresent one of the characteristics. In this case, this survey will overrepresent the number of murders, arson, and robbery in my community. And therefore, I can't trust the data. Even if the respondents want to be truthful, the way I've collected the data has made it so that this is not possible. One way to avoid measurement bias, of course, is to have questions that the respondents are able to answer honestly. So it doesn't mean that you never have to ask any tough questions. You could ask, what crimes have you committed? But maybe you might want to make sure to avoid measurement bias to add an option here that says other. So that if I've only committed like a parking ticket, I can write that down here. Or maybe an option here that says none. Because if I've committed none of these crimes, or I've been an upstanding citizen, I can check off that option that says none. Also notice that this is multiple choice and I'm not able to choose more than one option. What if I've killed someone and I've robbed them? That is 2 different crimes and I wouldn't be able to choose both of them. So you have to make sure that the way you're collecting your data is your respondents are able to give their complete answer. We have something called sampling bias. Notice that this email went out to the members of the neighborhood association. Not all the people that lived in the neighborhood, only the ones that are registered at this association. This is an example of sampling bias, when the sample does not represent the population well. So if you have not created a good stratified sample or a sample that represents the population really well, then you have created a situation where you have sampling bias. And in this case, maybe all the members of this neighborhood association are criminals. Maybe this is like sort of like a thieves guild. And in this case, these responses will actually have a lot of crimes, and that won't represent the population really well. Or maybe it's the other way around, where the people in this association are really good model citizens, and you're not allowed in this association if you have committed any crimes. If that's the case, then how would this data ever get any crimes honestly reported? To avoid this, we may want to extend our survey to more members of the population in such a way that it actually represents the population accurately. Finally, we have an example. This is an example of something called non-response bias. So response bias is when your respondents might lie to you and the responses can't be trusted. Non-response bias is when the opinions of the people that did answer, even though they're truthful, they will be different from the people who did not answer your survey. So maybe everybody from the neighborhood association got this survey, and because they read, oh, we're going to publish this on our website, only the people who have committed no crimes, or only the people who are comfortable saying, hey, this is my name, this is my address, I've committed 0 crimes, go ahead and publish that. Their answers are going to be very different from the people who want to be truthful, but don't want to have their name or address associated with that. So if the answers from the people who responded to your survey, even if they're truthful, are different from the answers of the people who did not respond to your survey, then you have created a situation where you are encountering non-response bias. Overall, our key points here are that data collection must be done ethically. Any data that you do collect should only be shared in aggregate, which means that the data is shown as a whole without the ability for anybody to personally identify a member of the sample. The members of that sample should be totally anonymous. If you want to try and maintain the privacy of the respondents, that will allow them to feel safe enough to answer honestly. And if they don't answer honestly, then we have response bias. We cannot trust that data. Ensure that your methodology, the way you collect your data, is free of any type of bias. For example, some of the common types of bias you'll encounter are sampling bias, when your sample sucks, when your sample doesn't represent the population. Response bias, when the people who are giving you answers are lying to you. Non-response bias, when some people who don't answer your survey, their answers are going to be very different from the people who do answer your survey. And finally, measurement bias, where the people who want to answer your survey honestly, they can't because there's something wrong with the way you're actually collecting your data. The way you're collecting your data actually messes up your data, and that is called measurement bias. So let's just go back to that survey and make some recommendations to the BGNA to improve this survey to uphold those principles of data collection, that we maintain those ethics, privacy, honesty, and avoid any situations where we might have bias. To start off, let's fix the sampling bias problem. Instead of just sending this to the members of the association, we'll change it to the members of the neighborhood. Every household will get a letter. If they're part of the association, they may get an email. If they're not, somebody may go door to door and stick this letter in their mailbox. And that would reduce sampling bias because everybody got a letter. Now you could sample it, you could change your sampling method. You could do systematic sampling where every 10th house gets a letter. You could do stratified sampling where the proportions of the houses that get one match the demographics of the neighborhood. Whatever method you choose, you should be drawing from the entire population, not just the few members that are part of the association. So some people said that they would not respond, maybe because they don't want to be publicly identified. They don't want their information to be published on this website so that everybody can find out who they are and where they live and stuff. That is non-response bias. How might we fix that? One thing we could do is we could remove this question that asks for the respondent's full name. And we could change their address to just, hey, what's your postal code? Because the postal code could belong to any number of people. And it would still give us some information about, where the crimes are happening the most. We could also change this from publishing this data on our website to identify everyone to just saying we will analyze this data to reduce local crime. So they're saying that they're not saying that they're going to publish it online, and that way maybe the people who are responding, if they are criminals, they might say, okay, well, I'll answer this as long as it can't be traced back to me. And that way you're reducing the amount of people who are not willing to respond to your survey. We might want to change this question, because people may not want to admit to committing crimes, but they might be willing to admit to witnessing crimes. So maybe we might ask a question like, have you noticed an increase in local criminal activity? Yes or no? And that would reduce response bias, because people don't have to admit to something that they may be, later on find themselves in legal trouble about. The last type of bias we encountered was measurement bias, because the question here only allowed you to select that you've committed murder, arson, or robbery. How could we change this to avoid measurement bias? I might change this question as follows. It might say, we're going to change this idea from ourselves admitting that we've committed crimes to instead talking about crimes that we've witnessed. So we might change this to, what types of crimes have you noticed? What categories of crimes? Because there's lots of crimes, right? There's robbery, which is different from burglary. There's murder, which is different from manslaughter. So you might just say, what categories have you noticed? And notice that in these options, I've included other. So that my respondents, if they didn't notice any of these, but they did notice something else, they might select this option, other, and that way my measurement bias is reduced. If they want to answer honestly, they can. And in this way, if the BGNA sent out a survey like an email like this, where they say that, dear neighbor, and they're talking about any of their neighbors, we're putting together a survey to analyze, to reduce local crime. And this is their survey. What's your postal code? Have you noticed an increase? And what categories of crime have you noticed? They can certainly collect lots of really valuable data on where the crimes are happening in their neighborhood, whether those crimes are happening more often, and what sorts of crimes are happening, so they can, appropriately distribute their resources to tackling them. If you like this video, please like, rate, subscribe, and join our mailing list. And you can find this lesson as well as practice questions, solutions, handouts, and more on our storefront. Thanks and have a great day.